Welcome. We are from ARWA, Alberta Romance Writers Association. I'm actually going to read from this to make sure that I get it right, 100% right. Welcome. Alberta Romance Writers Association is one of the oldest and most successful writing organizations in Alberta, and we have just celebrated our 25th anniversary in May. We meet twice a month, and our workshops are a mix of lectures, discussions, and hands-on writing. If you are interested in joining us, you can pick up one of our business cards. I have a bunch here. We also have a table in the merchants room, so if you guys like what you hear. We are an all-genre craft writing group. Yes, we started in romance. There's a lot of romance writers, but all genres are welcome. All genres benefit from practicing the writing of the craft. So there's my spiel on that. So our panelists today, Sharon Wildwind.
Hi.
Jude Wilner, Billie Millholland, and myself, Sarah Kades. And I will let each one of us give our own bio spiel to you guys. So, Grace also wanted me to mention that the four of us, we range from almost founding members of the association to relatively new members, which I'm pretty sure Grace was picking on me. All of us are multi-published in romance and other genres and nonfiction. So, we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to give you a little chat about how we include romance without necessarily sex in our stories. We're totally open up to questions. Do you want questions at the end or pop up? Whenever.
Doesn't matter to me.
How about
what works?
Wild card?
Yeah.
Whatever works. So if you guys have a question, say it, because sometimes you forget and you're like, oh crap, I meant to ask that question. So we are a safe bunch.
And we have a sign up here that says this room is being recorded, and we have to repeat the questions that you say into the microphone. So give us a break with the questions, okay? I don't want to be embarrassed. Okay.
I can be embarrassed. That's cool. No problem.
Well, it's okay as long as it's one sentence question instead of 5. Too hard to remember.
Would you like to start, Sharon, with a little bit about yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
I live in Calgary. I am primarily a mystery writer, though I do write about relationships, and so you get romance and sex in there as well. My fifth and final book in my first series is coming out in November. That will complete the series, and I'm working on a standalone and on a couple of plays right now.
My name is Jude Wilner. I've been writing forever. I joined the group shortly after they had the original conference and had a lot of lessons to learn, which they taught me. I don't think you ever stop learning, but I did manage to sell to Harlequin Silhouette at the time. Sold 3 books with them. One for Kensington. Oh, am I not on? One for Kensington, which does not publish anymore, and I currently have a time travel online with New Concepts Publishing because I love history as well as romance, so I brought the two together.
Hi, I'm Billie Millholland, as you can see. I've also been writing probably forever. I joined the Alberta Romance Writers quite early on. I'm not exactly sure at what point. At that point, I wasn't writing romance, but this group puts on the best workshops of any writing group ever. And then one of the first things I published after joining them was actually a time travel romance, which surprised me. And I've since published in a lot of genres, from YA to children's to speculative fiction, fantasy, etc., etc. I'm usually all over the place. And not all of my stories include sex. Some of them do. Many of them include romance or a suggestion thereof. And I've discovered the hard way that there's a lot of good ways and bad ways to do both.
I'm Sarah Kades. I came to writing. I fell into writing. I've always been an avid reader, and I was on the phone with a friend from Manitoba, a writer, and she was tossing around. She's like, oh, yeah, I want to tell you about this series idea I have. And so I listened, and I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty funky. And then for 2 months, a story started forming in my head, and so I called back. I'm like, I think I have a story with your little thing you're doing. Like, can I play too? And she's like, yeah, try. That'll be great. Like, if it gets accepted, cool. And if not, whatever, you're probably going to have a blast writing it. So that's how I jumped into writing. I was very fortunate. My first piece was accepted. I got an ebook and then a print run in an anthology with the series. It was super fun. I have the rights back, so now I'm going to check out self-publishing. Went to a great panel a couple hours ago on that. Have a short story out just in our ARWA's annual magazine, which are also at the Merchant's Table. And that was super fun, and that was one of ARWA's writing, one of our workshops. I've never done a writing exercise because I kind of stumbled into writing. It's fascinating. Try it. I'm like, oh, right, like, shouldn't you just write, like, just kind of go for the bones, go for what you're going to get out there? No, like, do the exercise and then watch amazing stuff come up. So it was a great time, and that's where my short story came up. I'm currently working on my first full-length novel, which is very exciting. I think I'm 3/4 of the way done, but who knows, because who knows what's going to come up. I joined ARWA after the release of my first book, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I have so much more to learn. I'm learning. Every single time I went, I learned more things. And every single time I sat down to write, I learned more things. So it's been a longer process and with a full-length novel, but it's very exciting, and I love it. And I'm so excited that When Words Collide is here because I learned so many things, and I'm very excited for all of you guys to learn lots of things too. So today we're going to talk about romance in writing and not just in the bedroom. When I was thinking, what am I going to say for my part of this? I actually I gave a workshop on this for ARWA with writing sexual tension, heightening your reader's satisfaction, and sexual tension is not the bedroom. Well, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. So for me, that's where my brain automatically went. So are you guys, I can blurt out. Do you guys want to jump in? Like, how do you want your format?
Okay, so you don't have a bunch of questions. We can just blab.
I think so. Let's start blabbing.
Okay, I can blab.
You're on.
Because I remember the first sex scene I ever tried to write, because I'd read Lady Chatterley's Lover, and when I was in grade 9, and I thought, woo, boy, this is words I've never seen put together in sentences before, and so. I had the story, and the story was a pretty good story. But then they stopped and jumped into bed, and I wrote a bunch of sentences that I thought, oh, this is so brilliant. And then they were done, and then they went on with the story. I had about 3 sex scenes in that story, and I sent it to an editor friend of mine who was very experienced, and it came back to me, and the story came to me, and all the sex scenes were gone. And I said, well, Ruth, I didn't think you were a prude. Like, she said, oh, believe me, she said, this has got nothing to do with that. You just sort of, you've written a little mechanical thing. Your story's not that bad, but you didn't. She said, the mechanical thing might be, like, biologically correct. But she said it's a yawner. Nobody's going to be excited by this or intrigued. But the main thing that she said to me is, no matter how you insert the sex scene, no pun intended, you have to have a relationship that is working. And a relationship, it can't be just, the old, well, boy meets girl, boy hates girl, girl hates boy. They have all this hate stuff and they jump into bed. And she said that, which is kind of what I was doing. And she said it's distasteful, and I was really embarrassed. What do you mean distasteful? But what I've learned over time is that if your relationship doesn't work, if whoever it is, a guy and a girl, or a guy and a guy, a girl and whatever it is, whatever relationships you're writing about, if that actual relationship doesn't work, and if you can't create some chemistry before the bedroom, your bedroom scene's never going to work. And if you create that chemistry prior to the bedroom, you can make a certain amount of mistakes in the in the bedroom part. The other thing that I learned is that timing and pacing is everything, and you have to figure out how it fits with the moment and the mood. you get it going good. I finally figured out how to do one, and I wrote one that relationship was pretty good. The sex scene was, I thought, pretty good. But then I got carried away with myself. I thought, oh, this is so great. Well, it went on and on and on for pages. And I'm not skillful enough to make it intriguing for that many pages. What's that? Yeah. So I mean that's kind of the crux of what I've learned. There's all kinds of other. I mean, if you want details, you'll have to ask for them.
When I was given the topic of this discussion, I thought to myself, okay, we're talking about not that sex scene, which is all lovely and well and good, but like say there has to be a build up to this. I wrote the first 3 books that I wrote were gentle. There was no sex allowed. So I thought, all right, how are we going to get this sexual tension in there? It's not that you couldn't have a little bit, obviously, of the touchy-feely, but there was not taking it all the way. And I realized that it's quite an art to be able to do that, and you have to slow down and think about how you're going to maneuver this, because, okay, for example, one of my favorite series, it was a British series, it's called North and South, and it's a period piece. So everybody's got their clothes on and their cravats on and their coats, and it's a very slow and gentle, it's a lovely romance. By the time that last scene came out, the hero, Richard Armitage, his cravat was undone. It was a hot day, whatever, he had taken it off. I thought I was going to pass out. I was so ready to see a little skin. Okay? And so
you built the tension.
They built the tension. I had to rewind. You know, it was such an impact. I said, okay, stop what you're doing, Jude. Think about this. How did that person? Well, of course, the period piece was part of it. It was because that's just how they dressed and this sort of thing. But it was just so skillfully done, and I thought, okay, you've got it. That worked for me. Now, it was a very visual thing. I don't know how. I didn't read the book as well. So if you watch shows like that and something twigs for you, watch it again, rewind it, think about it, jot it down, figure out why. How did they take you down this garden path without actually getting into
and without
bed?
you noticing.
And without you noticing.
Without you noticing that they're drawing you into that relationship, into the hero and heroine's relationship, because you don't even know you're going there, and then you're there like, when are they going to do this? Come on.
That's right, and that's a part of it. So with one of the books that I wrote, because we couldn't have any sex, no bedroom scenes, it was way back when they first started saying that, you know, if you had this second child to save the first child, it was the umbilical cord cells and all this sort of thing. This was way, way back before they really even knew if this was going to work. And so I took that and I ran with it, and I said, okay, this couple, he's going to come back to find the child he didn't know existed because the child is sick. And he's going to say, okay, this is what we need to do. We need to have another child to try to save this one, which is an ethical question, but we'll just put that one aside. This was it. So how are you going to get this second child? How are you going to get that sexual tension? And so I just put them in a little cafe, and I had them have a conversation. Because they had obviously had sex before, because they have a child together. But that was offside. That was okay. I had the hero discuss with her how they were going to have this child together. And so I had carte blanche. It was, Brittany, don't you remember how you like this? Don't you remember when I did this? You're there. And they're sitting across the table. Nobody's touching, and she's starting to go like this. Oh my God, don't, you know, yes, I remember. And there's this whole sex scene in a cafe. Not quite when Harry met Sally. It was quite a tame conversation, but that's how I got it in that way, because in effect, when you're writing one of those gentle romances, your hands are tied. Literally. Your hands are tied, and you can't do that. Sometimes it's a whole lot easier just to get her done. Just get the clothes off, get them in the bed, and write it, and there you go. You're done. You know, as long as your mom's not reading it, you're fine. But to stand back and be like behind a barrier where you're not allowed to step across that. Now, you may very well step across that in your book. That's fine, but not too soon. You want that barrier all the way along so that, like I say, when I saw Richard Armitage's neck, it was over for me. That was it. He belonged to me, and that's what I thought. But stop when a movie works for you. Stop it. Look at it again and say, why did that work for me? What was it that you did? And you'll probably find that they kept you behind that barrier until they wanted you to cross that line. So that was one way that I got you there without actually opening the bedroom door.
For me, sensuality trumps sexuality anytime. I love it when I love my characters. I love writing characters that I want to have a beer with. That's what I keep in my head when I'm writing characters, because those are the characters I love to read. The ones that I'd have a beer or coffee with, that's the kind of characters I want. So I love it when I can write sexual tensions with my characters, and because they go through such agony. Like I'm sure we all in this room have, when there's somebody, sometimes we have no idea why we love them, or we don't even know we love them, but there's just something so about the other person, but they drive you crazy. And so when you write your character, like have your characters have that turmoil, that conflict. And I like to go through the senses, like, and whether it's something as simple as the other person in a cafe, sitting across from you in the cafe, and it's a pretty hot day today. I'm like, and you notice like the bead of sweat dripping down his face. That's not sexy. It's sweat. But if you're looking and you can't focus on anything else because it's just that bead of sweat and it's glistening and like your senses are in overdrive, take your characters through that. Feel what that would feel like, and then write it down. Get it on your computer, your paper, whatever. Whether you're in a relationship now or feel that relationship, another thing for me that's very important is have your characters be rocked to their absolute core. We are not writing lust. Those are other books that I'm sure are super fabulous, but that doesn't float my boat. I need my characters so like their core is rocked, and you can't explain it, and you don't even know why they do that. But take your readers through that confusion and that agony of wanting somebody and not being able to figure out how they can have them, because you need conflict in your romance stories too, right? It can't just go, oh, I picked you, done, and then they jump into the bedroom. So, I like to go through the senses. I'm a very sensual person, so I recommend playing with the senses when you're writing about sexual tension.
Well, one of the things that I think romance is about is the surrender of power and the acceptance of power. And I think that anything that you can build in that is a power shift, that makes someone vulnerable, or that gives another character an opportunity to not take advantage of that vulnerability, is going to come out as romantic. And one of the things that I think is very important is to add sort of little things that aren't really in the plot, but they can build on one another. I suspect I'm not the only Doctor Who fan in the room. Anybody else out there? Okay. Those of you who aren't, I think this will still be clear enough. The 10th Doctor, Rose Tyler, and Snow. Anybody? Okay. One of the Doctor Who specials always takes place at Christmas time, and usually towards the end of the episode it's snowing, and the Doctor loves snow. And he'll go, oh, Christmas, and it's snowing! And Rose Tyler, who's a girl he's in love with, his companion he's in love with, will go, oh yeah, I love snow. And then the Doctor will think a minute, and he'll go, of course that's not really snow, that's really the ash from the decomposition of the spaceship we just blew up. And they do this like 3 times over 3 years. And in the last one, he gets real snow. And it is the saddest thing that you have ever seen in your life. And I think that built to a really romantic conclusion at the end of Time, Part 2, which is the last one that the 10th Doctor was in. His overture. Yeah. Yes, we have a question.
So what Liz said build a scene. So if you're not going to have blatant sex scenes, perhaps romance out of it.
Okay, so if the sex scene is the end of the tension, and you know that for whatever reason you're not going to have a sex scene in there, then what does that build-up lead to?
For me, the sex scene is not the end of the tension. It's the actual romantic relationship and the end game of that. So Jane Ann Krentz is very famous for she always throws a sex scene in right away. That's her style. She always has a sex scene between the hero and heroine right away. So they kind of jump the gun on that, and then they actually have to build the relationship part. And they have the sexual tension through that, and they don't hop back in the sack right away. And she always has a variety of reasons why they're not. But she actually starts with sex and then builds the sexual tension and the actual relationship. So that doesn't have to be true. That isn't necessarily the end game, the end point.
Well, in most stories, unless they're just real hardcore, I don't know, love stories of some sort. Most stories that they're along with the sexual tension that is happening between the two people, the story is usually about something else. There's usually other things at stake besides the relationship, and the power of the relationship within the story is really important. But the sexual tension, I don't know. I can't remember reading a story or seeing a movie anywhere where the sexual tension was the only thing. It's often an undercurrent and drives it at different points, but there's usually other things at stake, and that can change. And I can't quite imagine what it would be like if I don't know what the story would be like if you were building, and the only thing that would help this out is that you had a full-blown sex scene. It really, truly, your story should hold together whether you have a sex scene or not. And the sex scene should, if you have it, or if it should enrich it and should expand it, but it shouldn't be it. And whether or not they actually jump into bed, your story shouldn't depend on it. I suppose there are stories who might depend on that, but I don't think not a lot of them.
If I was to think about that, I would say in looking in one of the books where with the Kensington, I was able to have the sex scene. I put it pretty much at the middle. I tend to write the books for the 25%, the 50%, and the 75%. So these things are going to happen, give or take. And I think if you start reading with an eye like that, you'll see that a lot of authors will do that. And at the 50% mark, so I had the sexual tension going up to it. And then at the 50% mark, I had them sleep together. Now, that in itself caused all sorts of trouble, right? So because the heroine was somebody who did not want to lose control of her life. She'd been in control. She was an independent, strong woman. And the hero now thinks, hey, we've got something going here. She immediately backs off. So then you've got the second stage of sexual tension. Man, that was good. Let's do it again. Nuh-uh. Because now I'm going to withdraw. I've got to get my head around this. You're full steam ahead into this relationship, and I'm not there yet. So then, knowing how good it was and how compatible they are, that was a whole other kettle of fish. That now you're starting to talk psychological and can I commit, can all this sort of thing. So she's going to back off and say, well, yeah, that would be very easy to do that, but we're not going to do that because I've got to sort some things out here and get this clear in my head, and we have issues. So there you've got a whole other set of problems, but certainly, that would be the end. If everything was fine, that would be the end of the book at the 50% mark. So what is your 75% mark is going to be where you think that this can't be saved. How are they going to get through this? What is going to be the saving grace here? So you've got a whole half of the book that you can still draw it out in different ways, in different terms, whatever that situation or problem, or it could be distance, it could be I live in Omaha, you live in Europe, whatever you as a writer put in there. as to what is going to keep these people apart now. So this was keeping them apart for the first part, and then maybe you've got some other issues. And those are probably the meatier issues as to why this relationship is somewhat struggling right now. And that's part of the mystery of how you're going to get it to resolve at the end.
Before I came to this panel, I asked various friends of mine to tell me, give me an example of because there's something else that is operating here, is that every one of us, and all of you and all of us up here, we are attracted and turned on by different kinds of stories. Sometimes a movie that a friend of mine will see, and she'll say, "Oh, that was so hot," and I'll watch it and I'll think, "Man, yeah, it was okay." And if you're writing about relationships and sexual tension, no matter where it leads, don't try to write something that like if I took that book that my friend said was really hot, and because it was really popular, and I was going to try to do it that way, but it didn't affect me in the same way as it did her, it won't work. So you need to choose the movies and the books that really work for you, whether it's something really gentle or something a little more persistent, whatever it is, and think about your characters in terms of how it is for you, because how it is for you is going to be how it is for a whole lot of other people. But I've made the mistake myself of trying to do it like something that was really popular, but it didn't necessarily work. But one of the other things that somebody had said to me, pointed out, said that one of the hottest TV series for her is Bones. And if some of you probably watched that, Booth and Bones, I mean, they eventually had a roll in the hay, but it took a long time. But that wasn't the issue. Every single week, that was not what the story was about. The story was about whoever was murdered and what the bones said, blah 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 blah. But Booth and Bones always had this kind of sizzle and this crackle between the two of them, on and off into various intensities. And my friend who likes that said, someone else picked out, does anybody watch Murdoch Mysteries? Mm-hmm. Then Murdoch and the Julia, and this was actually a guy who had suggested to me that even it was a period piece and it shouldn't have worked in his mind, because he liked something a little more upfront, but it did work. And I haven't gone back to watch some of those series again. I just sort of come in and out of them. But if you have people in your life who point something out and have a real emotional response to that relationship and that sexual tension, pay attention to it in a different way, and see if you can pick up, because there's going to be a whole lot of things. There's going to be a whole lot of subtle things that happen, and they're not going to be only about boy is removed from girl or can't have girl or whatever. It's going to be worked in with the actual what the big story is about. All of this will be woven into that, and it's not as tricky as it looks, but sometimes it's tricky to watch them. Watch that kind of movie that you're after. Turn the sound off, and watch some of the scenes that either you think are really hot or someone else does with the sound off. Then turn your back away and listen to those same scenes without looking at what's going on, and that was absolutely remarkably revealing to me.
There is somewhere online something called the 12 Steps to Intimacy. And believe it or not, it's not rules for a self-help group, though goodness knows I think some of us could use one. But it talks about sort of 12 steps that two people who will eventually go to bed together fall into. And how you can make each one of the steps romantic. The first one is the unacknowledged gaze or something like that, and it means that you see this guy that you really like, and you want to watch him, but you don't want him to catch you watching you. No, I'm not watching him. No, I'm not watching him again, And so you can start with that kind of a thing, and then you move up to the acknowledged gaze, where their gazes lock. And please, for my sake, don't have their eyes lock, okay? That is so messy. One of the things that a lot of writers play around with, and a lot of players, I think, writers rather, use incorrectly, is food. Because it's a very convenient thing to have two people sitting down across a table and use that as the setting for your dialogue, and then they just do dialogue back and forth. And actually, those kinds of scenes are very, very dull. But there are a lot of things that you can do with food that become very romantic. Yeah, I think some of you in here probably remember Dallas, the original one, not the one that they tried to revive. People always met in restaurants, and JR would flirt with the waitress whenever he was ordering his bourbon and branch water. But then nobody ever ate anything, because afterwards somebody else would come along and sit down, and they would have this discussion, they would have this fight, and then one or both of them would get up and leave. So there were a lot of table scenes, but there was absolutely no eating in Dallas. I don't know what those people were surviving on. There is also Lois McMaster Bujold, her Shards of Honor, which is the first book where we meet Cordelia and Errol. And do the words oatmeal and blue cheese dressing mean anything to anyone in this room? They're stranded on a planet. There's a war going on. They're on opposite sides. For various reasons, they're stranded together, and it becomes one of these survival stories. And the only thing that they save out of their food stocks is oatmeal and blue cheese dressing. And it becomes a running gag through the rest of the book that they're eating oatmeal and blue cheese dressing again. One of the other things that you can use is food fantasies, particularly if the people are in some kind of a deprivation situation. And so they have these wonderful fantasies about what they're going to eat when they survive and get back to civilization. And you can follow this up with that meal actually happening, but you need to put a twist on it. Maybe he serves the meal to her or something goes wrong, but that can become very romantic. And there was a commercial that was on around Christmas time that had a couple of people who were, for some reason were moving into their first house on Christmas Eve. I mean, can you imagine how horrible that is? And they're trying to unpack everything, and everything's in chaos. And she's looking out of her kitchen window into the house next door, where somebody is cooking a traditional Christmas dinner, and there's the turkey and there's everything, and she's just kind of looking at it. And then he's doing something that you can't really see because of the way that they cut the shots. And then at the end, he calls her in to dinner, and he's set a tablecloth out on a box, and he's put a candle there, and they're unwrapping Big Macs and French fries. And I'm having heart palpitations from a McDonald's commercial.
McDonald's gets you.
It does.
Yeah.
I'll try to make the question one sentence. It seems to me that in romance writing, you have to do a lot of telling, not just showing. You do have to describe feelings. Would you agree or disagree?
Oh, we have to say that. The question was, in romance writing, do we tell, not show? And particularly feelings. I would say no. Of course, it's been pounded in my head with ARWA, show, not tell. And I have a fabulous critique group that is really incredible to work with. So, no, you can show. Yes, you want to get. I actually get in trouble for not having enough internal dialogue from my critique partners because I show too much. I actually don't. I don't have that self-reflection that they're looking for. June gets me every time. So no, you can show. Do you have a specific example that you want, or what can we think of?
In analyzing how the genre works, it seems to me they spend a lot of time, each character character spends a lot of time with the
In the head, I can't stand books like that. I write adventure romance. I can't do, like, too much in the head. I'm like, I have to go.
Yeah, me too. Too much in the head. I'm gone somewhere else in my head.
Yeah.
And but I think that you can show like deep feelings of every sort if you've built up if we get to know your characters, and anything can show something really deep. If you have somebody who is used to not showing any feeling, you've drawn them that way. And even just saying a sharp intake of breath or something like that. In fact, I think that's probably better, because if you have to explain to your readers that so-and-so is feeling this or that, it in many times it's kind of insulting to your readers that you have
figure it out.
Yeah, that you can't explain to them, or if there's no other way to do it, maybe you don't know your character well enough to see with body movement or actions or picking up something, or whatever it is a character will do. Everybody does something different when they're nervous or when they're embarrassed or and your character, when you build it, your reader will know. They'll know when they're feeling all kinds of things if you've let them into like who your character is and what they're doing. I personally, I'd avoid the telling, especially when it comes to emotions, if at all possible, because
It's not deep enough.
No,
You don't, like, if you just say, yeah, it's not, you don't really mine the emotion, because you don't draw your reader in, because emotion is what I love in the books, like, and you really mine for emotion. Like, you just rip as much emotion as you can from your scenes, from your characters, and it doesn't have to be super, it can be any type of emotion.
Yeah.
You just, like, really wrench your characters and your reader so that they feel it too. But I also use secondary characters to show stuff, because I can't, the internal dialogue drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So I love my secondary characters, and they do a lot of I bounce off my secondary characters quite a bit to show and not tell, because your hero and heroine aren't, most books, they're not together constantly. You need some outside. You need some outside characters. So.
Well, one thing that stands in my mind is a little scene in a story that really exemplifies that showing emotion, and it was the character was an older woman who was really stern and terse and kind of humorless, not very emotional, not very loving. There's all kinds of things that, not really a distasteful character, a character that you were kind of rooting for this character, and then there is one scene where, because of something that happened to a little girl and her cat, and they're sitting outside on the swing, and the little girl is talking away. And at one point, the writer has the old woman reach her finger across and then just touch the cat's ear. But because the way they had drawn the character, the little girl, the cat, the woman, when I read that, I went without even thinking about it, because it was so delicate, and it was very, 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 a very light touch, but the emotional impact for me was really deep, because they built it up that way. So there's tons of ways to do that. But I said you had a question.
It was more, I just like more conflict in my romance. And I find that when the two people of whatever gender, it's easy to have a person who meets a person. And it's easy to have a person who loses a person. But the reason why the person can't be together with the other person, that has to be the push and the conflict of the relationship, as well as the problem you're trying to solve. I think when you're talking about these tiny little moments, is after you've earned 75% of the book to get to that point where a moment can touch.
Yeah.
Show, nothing is worse than reading a book where, he wants to be with her, but she hasn't made up her mind yet. Or, he wants to be with him, but they have to talk about it. There has to be something really big stopping them from having that continued romance, or there is no conflict. conflict, there's no book. Otherwise, it's just a nice short story.
I've proofread manuscripts for other writers, and swear to God, they come out fighting because they think that that's conflict. They're just ready. Well, no. Stop right there. The conflict, it's kind of a wrong word to use because it does connote, fighting and fisticuffs. And yeah, it's a bad. I don't know what a better word is, but anyway, the conflict being that it's got to go deeper. If a conversation can settle this between the two characters, then you got nothing, right? So it's got to be a deeply held belief that could be, self-worth. Give me some other words. Like it could be a belief that this is the way it's supposed to be, and you can't just take off.
There's tons of
I'm passionate in adventure romance. Unless there's a plague or a monster eating people, they can usually talk. But if you keep throwing things at them, they can't even say no at the same time.
But those would be you've got external conflicts and you've got internal conflicts.
There's 3 to 1. There should be 3 external for every 1 internal.
I don't like rules.
It's whatever suits that story.
I don't go with rules.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
whatever
I'll
suits
do
the story.
25, 50, 75%, and that's about it. Just because I need to pace myself and see that there's a turning point. Because at 50%, your characters have to be different now than they were at the beginning, and they will never go back to being. Chances are they will never go back to being that. So you have, and that's why I use the 50%. So as far as internal, external, you can have external conflicts, but you have to have at least one strong internal reason that these people cannot see themselves together. And that's what you have to identify, and then everything else can flow around it, and we'll probably grow from that. But if you don't have that base, then you'll just have them fighting. You'll just have them arguing. You'll think, I worked retail many years ago, and in a food store, and it was just the husband and wife came up, and she says, "What do you want?" And he goes, "No, this man was not going to say what he wanted for supper. No. What do you want? Just pick something. Just what do you want? And this sort of thing." And he goes, "Okay, I want that." And she goes, "Well, you can't have that." And I just thought, you know what? That's conflict. Okay, that's just a idea of this. And I just said, in my head, why don't you just divorce her? Swear to God, I can give you the chicken feed, but you know what you really need is to go away and be happy, both of you. So but like I say, that's an external conflict. Probably there was all sorts of other conflicts when they got home that were preventing these two people from being happy. But I think that's what you really need, is to find that internal. And then don't throw too many of the externals. I mean, if you're constantly let them work on that internal conflict. If you keep throwing too many, externals, then it's just wow. It's like you're swimming upstream. You're a salmon swimming upstream. You have to give them some time to work on this.
Yeah, I use tension in place of the word conflict because of a quote by Ursula Le Guin, who said, "Writers speak of conflict as if that's the only emotion that exists between human beings." And I thought, I think she's right. I think I've fallen in love with this conflict word, and so I started using tension instead. It's one of the reasons I like to take my characters out of doors, because there's so much you can do externally with people out of doors. You can throw in weather, you can throw in isolation, you can make them work as a team, you can have role reversals for whatever way, and you can use those externals to indicate some of the internal conflicts that people are having, because you're putting them in different situations where they're sort of going, "Oh, I didn't know you were going to act like this in that situation. That tells me that you have more honor than I thought you did," or whatever it is. But I like to tie the two of them together.
Well, I know that I'm really bad at math, so I can't tell you percentages of anything, or if it's 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 or anything like that. So there's probably a few of you out there who also might not be any good at math. I am absolutely fascinated by people who know how to break that down and it's extremely useful. But I think you can still do it if you can't do the math, because the thing is, before you're writing something, anybody and you shouldn't be writing if you don't read. And probably it's the same with movies. You owe it to yourself to go through everybody that you can possibly read that you like, maybe like a little bit, maybe like a not. And there's all kinds of things that go into your whole mind and in yourself while you're doing this, because you're learning pacing, and you're learning about tension. And sometimes for people like me who can't do math, what I have to do is try really hard. Sometimes I'll read a book the first time just for pleasure because it just grabs me. But if it grabs me that much, then I'll read it a second and maybe a third time with my writer head and ears on, and try to sort of absorb it that way. And I do have friends who will also take a book apart mathematically, and it works perfectly for them. But I guess I'm just saying this because when I heard you, when I was a younger writer, and I used to hear these things about 70% or something, and I went, oh, I don't know how to keep track of that, and I would make little pie charts for myself, but I didn't know how to populate them. So it's just, for the 2 or 3 of you out there who are like me, who can't do math, don't worry.
I would get back to your question about showing emotion. Why not get a friend, have her think about what she's about to, a little acting sort of a thing, and have her, in her mind, have anger, angst, fear, whatever emotion. And then just the two of you come together and have her, without words, perhaps a word or two, act it out, just a few minutes. And then you'll be there sitting. Because she's not just going to be standing there, right? She's going to be, it's almost like charades, Is she going to be this? Is she going to be this? Is she going to be this? Is she going to... And let that other person show you her emotion in actions. And then you jot them down and go, oh, I see, yes, that's... Because that emotion for anger is going to be very different than something else. So that's just one way, and she'd have to show you that. She can't tell you.
Another writing exercise.
Oh, my secret.
Fantastic. I was going to mention, don't write your sexual tension into a corner that you don't want to go, because sometimes that can happen too. Like with any type of tension, you can write yourself into a corner, and then you're like, how am I going to get out of here? So I recently read a friend's piece, and she did write her characters into a corner, and then the romance and relationship completely stalled out. So also be very aware of that too. Like, it's going to ebb and flow, which is what you want it to do, but it's not going to stagnate. It's not going to stall. It's going to be able to keep rolling. Like, it's fluid, right? It's motion. You want your sexual tension and obviously your characters' relationships to flow. We want to flow it. So I wanted to add that part too. And I had one other thing. Throw your readers bones. Sorry. Off my article on my blog and website. Throw your readers bones. I need a lot of action in the stories that I read. And if the relationship isn't doing something, that frustrates me. So I can't wait till, towards the middle of the book or end of the book for anything to happen. Like, I like it as a reader to be thrown, like, just those tension bones, right? Those sexual tension bones, that this actually is going somewhere, that it is leading up. So now when I read, I often, like you talked about, you read with your writer hat on. Sometimes it's hard to take off. And you realize when you're like, okay, I need a bone. Like, you need to throw me a bone now. And you also recognize when you're like, oh, this is good. Like, you just led me down this fantastic path, like this roller coaster of emotions. That's exactly why I'm reading this book. So, anyways, just wanted to add that part too. This is also, this is my Sarah hat. it's also, since we're talking about sexual tension and possibly going into the bedroom, don't be afraid of including condoms in your scenes. Mm-hmm. It's important. It's the way it is today. So don't be afraid of them, and you can also make them very sexy. So
unless you're writing Victorian, although the
French letters.
Yeah, they're right. That's sheepskin. True.
I'm not writing Victorian.
Well, I don't know if they weren't attractive because I haven't seen one.
You can make anything. I think you can make any scene sexy and responsible, and don't be afraid of that, because that's a component that is today, right? So have fun throwing those in too. Are there any other questions? Yes, no? All good. Do you guys have anything?
Well, I'm curious to know from you guys out there is when you're reading something, are there either sexual either tension or sexual acts or sexual scenes that you don't like, that ruin a book for you? She says insert, what did say that again? Insert? Yeah, insert tab A in tab B or slot B. Okay, yeah. You were saying.
Time.
Well, she has something to say. Okay. Okay, Randy says we have to leave.
Thank you all very, very much for attending.
Have a great convention.